Thanks, Faye. I don't recall writing that last sentence myself. So this is an interesting topic, and I'm a little bit nervous, I admit, because I know about a third of the people in the room here, and many of you are as qualified or more qualified, Dennis, to talk about this as much as I am. But I think you'll find interesting the part of this that says understanding. Mae's research is really helping us, one of her target watersheds, with this understanding part. And so with that, I'm just going to jump right in. I wasn't trained on the thing here, but I do have to give a few disclosures first. I'll use the word we a lot, but in that context of we work very closely with the Scott Soil and Water Conservation District and with the NRCS. And Chief, I'm not putting any words in your mouth when I speak, but I do appreciate your staff and how we work together. And so I'm with the county and I'm with the watershed organization, but we really work very close together. We've had an awful lot of help from different organizations and people, and we still have a long way to go. I have a lot to learn about this and keep going. When I talk to groups, acknowledgments from Mae and her research too. She has a number of students, local partners. She worked with both Scott County and Dakota County on this research and had some funding organizations, and there were 780 some people that responded to her survey in these two counties. When I talk to groups about targeting, I say that I need 6 things. I need science and tools to do the precision. I need to convert that then into a strategy. I need money, and I need a dedicated staff structure to deliver that conservation to those target locations, and we need to continue to learn and adapt. I'm not going to talk about science and tools or strategy because that's the subject of a number of other topics today. Money is pretty self-evident. We're going to focus on these two right here, the dedicated staff and having this structure to get that conservation where precision is saying it's needed. And if there's time, I'll talk about learning and adapting just very shortly. As a way of introducing Mae and turning this over shortly, I want to give a little bit of story. We did a lot of work on Sand Creek, study-wise, to find these targeted locations. Where does conservation make the most sense? In 2007 and 2008. And then we got some grant money from the McKnight Foundation to approach landowners where we identified these targeted needs to be. We had identified about 250 locations where we thought that the conservation efforts made the most sense. This effort, we picked about half of that. We picked 127 landowners. We contacted them. We had about a 33% success rate of folks actually signing up, coming in and talking to the conservationists about the projects that we identified on their properties. But what was really interesting is that for us, our management focus is on building a buffered environment. And so out of these 127 projects, most of those were managing the riparian vegetation. 0 of them were the ones that signed up. It was all people with visual problems, stream bank erosions, gullies, those types of things that took us up on the offer. So somehow we were missing connecting with this group. And that's when I read about Mae's grant that she had just received in the MinGram and gave her a call, and Sand Creek became one of her targeted watersheds because her work was on the riparian landowners. One more thing before I turn it over. In terms of willing landowners, most of you have worked with them in here, and you know the answers to these 2 questions to some extent. You have opinions on them. Why do landowners implement conservation? Why don't landowners implement conservation? These are some of my opinions up here. I'll get into these. I'll reuse this slide a little bit. But I do want to focus a little bit on the 4th one down on your left side. Landowners participate because they're asked by someone they respect and trust. I'm president of my church council. I've been that for years. People do things at church because someone asked them to do it, not because they volunteer. Okay, and it occurs to me, if we're going to do precision conservation, somebody's going to have to ask. That data on what is precise to do resides in these websites in Bowser, resides with Dr. Mola, resides with the staff. That's not going to naturally translate to the landowners in terms of motivation and them knowing what to do. So asking is going to be very important. This is our secret weapon for asking. This is Diane Robbie. When we did that survey work, where we contacted 127 landowners, what we did was those staff who already had relationships made those contacts. Where they didn't, Diane made those contacts. We first sent a letter, said we're going to call you, and then Diane called and called and called until she actually talked to somebody. Nobody got mad because Diane is wonderful with people. They trust her. She knows everybody in Scott County by first name. So that's the secret weapon. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Mae, and then it'll come back to me for a little bit.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning and talk to you a little bit about the social sciences and how to bring social sciences into the conversation about precision conservation. As Faye mentioned, I'm a social scientist very much interested in the human dimensions of natural resource management. So I use social science theories from psychology, sociology, and social science monitoring tools, interviews, focus groups, and surveys to better understand people and communities and how people and communities engage in natural resource management. One of the main questions I've been focusing on as of late is what is the likelihood that landowners will engage in conservation? And specifically, what are the drivers to promote conservation behaviors, and what are some of those barriers or constraints? So I think it's important as we continue to discuss about precision conservation that we not only couple landscape data with spatial data, but we also think about coupling those data with social science data so that our decisions and our management are grounded in the best social sciences available. What I'm going to focus on today is a mail survey that we conducted in Sand Creek, which is in Scott County, as well as the Vermilion River watershed, which is in Dakota County primarily. We conducted a survey of riparian landowners, so folks living within 300 feet of a stream. The data I'm going to be presenting is people who live in Sand Creek and Scott County within 300 meters of a stream. 300 feet of a stream, We conducted a 4-wave mailing, so we sent out a survey and a series of reminders to increase response rates. We had a response rate in Sand Creek of about 46%. And we focused on, again, those determinants of conservation behavior. So just to give you kind of some context here, Sand Creek watershed is here within the Minnesota River Basin. Some pollutants of concerns, primarily turbidity, total suspended solids, as well as some chloride concerns as well. You can see some landscape change has occurred in Scott County, about 125% increase in population between 1990 and 2010, and a density of about 172 people per square mile. So when I think about potential drivers or constraints to conservation behavior, important social concepts come up like concern. Are people concerned about water resources? Are they aware of problems? And do they feel responsible for those problems? So one of the questions we asked respondents to the survey is, are you concerned about the consequences of water pollution? And we learned here that when we asked people about their concern, in general, folks are very concerned about these issues. They're concerned for multiple reasons: future generations, wildlife, aquatic life, and their own health. You can see here that from 80 to 90% of folks said they agree that they're concerned with these issues. The green here is Basically, I grouped folks who were neutral, so they neither expressed strong agreement or disagreement, or they marked that they didn't know, they weren't sure. We also asked people if they believed that a water resource problem exists in their community. And what do we see here is a little bit less agreement. So people are generally concerned about these issues, but they're less certain about the problems in their own communities. So we can see here that from 50 to about 40% agree with these statements, that water pollution poses serious threats to the quality of life in my community, or that water resources in my community are adequately protected. So not as strong of an agreement with these as being problems. Even more locally, we ask people to reflect on the quality of the streams in their backyards. Remember, these are all riparian landowners. We see a big distribution of perceptions, from water quality being very poor to very good, and about 1 out of 5 folks saying that they just don't know the quality of the water in their backyards. So we also wanted to find out, do people feel personally obligated to engage in conservation practices? We thought this was important, because if you feel personally compelled to do something, you're more likely to do it. We learned that almost 90% of people say that they will do whatever they can to prevent water pollution, that they feel a personal obligation to engage in those conservation practices. About 85% say that they will use conservation practices on their land or property, that they feel personally obligated to engage in conservation practices. Very encouraging. But we also wanted to ask sort of questions beyond that individual landowner level. So not just what you will do on your own property, but will you engage civically around water resource issues? And, whoops. Here we see these levels drop quite a bit, from 50 to 40% of people say that they do feel personally obligated, or that they are likely to work with other community members to protect the environment or talk to others about conservation programs. So we see a high level of individual commitment, but a lower level of sort of social or civic commitment to these issues. What are some potential barriers to conservation? We asked landowners, survey respondents, about their ability to protect water resources. We've asked questions about having knowledge and skills, having the ability to change the way they use their land, or having the financial resources they need to take care of their land. And you can see here about 4 out of 10 people say that they don't necessarily have the knowledge and skills. Almost 5 out of 10, and almost, again, 5 out of 10 say they don't have the ability or they don't have the financial resources they need to take care of their land. So those are potential barriers. We also wanted to know about respondents' perceptions of their communities. We know that watershed approaches to water quality problems require community commitment at that community level. So we asked respondents if they agree or disagree that their community has the ability to change land use to protect water, that their community has the financial resources needed to protect water, or that the community has the leadership needed to protect water. And what do we see here? Not a lot of agreement. So we go from 50% to maybe 23%, maybe 22% of folks agree that their community has the leadership needed to protect water resources. Could be another barrier here. At least it's a barrier from the perspective of the landowner. Now this, I think, is a critical slide to look at and to think about. We wanted to find out not only, again, about individual conservation practices, but also about civic engagement. And so we asked people in the last 12 months, have you read an environmental group's publication, discussed water quality issues with community members, joined or been a member of an environmental group, or just attended a meeting about an environmental issue? And you can see here very low levels of folks who have engaged in these civic actions. 50% here have read a publication, but these numbers decline pretty rapidly here. Not a lot of civic engagement around these issues. So some opportunities. Who influences conservation decisions? We are interested in this idea of social norms or norms of behavior and thinking about what agencies, what individuals might play a role in the decisions that landowners make. Family was at the top, soil and water conservation districts, Department of Natural Resources, neighbors, watershed management organizations, and PCA. So what this is telling me is that landowners are influenced by a lot of different people. When they make decisions, they think about a lot of different individuals, organizations, and how they may want them to respond, what sorts of behaviors are supported by these different groups. We wanted to focus specifically on some incentives, education and outreach programs, and how those may influence a person's engagement in conservation. And you can see here that learning is very important. That folks say they will be more likely, over 60%, over 50% people say they'll be more likely to engage in conservation practices if they can learn more about those benefits. Financial resources also was an important driver. About 60% of people said that would encourage them to engage in conservation practices. We did some statistical analysis to look at the differences between adopters and non-adopters, specifically of riparian buffers. In this case, we grouped the Sand Creek and Vermilion River watershed data. The first message here is that there's a lot of similarities between people who have buffers and who don't have buffers, sociodemographically, their problem awareness, who influences them, a lot of similarities. Some of the differences, as you might imagine, non-adopters have more negative beliefs about buffers. They perceive those constraints, that they don't have the ability to change their land use. They don't necessarily feel obligated, personally obligated to engage in conservation practices. They're far less civically engaged than folks who adopt buffers, and they're unlikely to use conservation practices in the future. So for targeting audiences in the Sand Creek watershed, there are more people, about 50 to 85% say they weren't civically engaged in the past 12 months. So this is a good opportunity area to target people and to get them civically engaged. Same thing with sort of addressing some of these perceptions, these constraints that landowners have. About 45% of people felt those constraints. So some quick lessons learned about targeting landowners. One of the messages from this survey work and the technical report that we just recently released is that you really need to focus conservation and use a landowner-targeted approach. Understanding local stream conditions is going to be very important. There's a general concern, but not a lot of local specific knowledge among landowners. Building peer-to-peer networks is critical. Establishing those social norms of conservation, fostering citizen information sharing, and developing those local leaders and sort of success stories is critical, which I know Paul is working on. And then facilitating civic engagement around water, building community around water resource issues, and instilling that sense of it's not just what I do on my property, but it's me being a good community member, me being engaged civically to promote water resource protection. Finally, because landowners are influenced by so many different groups and agencies, consistent messaging is going to be critical across agencies, across from state to local authorities. That consistent messaging is a critical issue because of the information overload and some confusion that we've detected about what is the right thing to do and how actually landowners can engage in those conservation behaviors.
Mae just gave me her final report yesterday, but she's been leaking me information all along. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about what we're going to do with this increased understanding of information that she's providing to us. And I broke it down into 3 areas. And first is follow the golden rule. Second is to build on and promote success. And the third one is listen to your mom. That's it. We can quit now, can't we? You all know kind of this. And I want to go first into the golden rule a little bit. This picture is from those landowner meetings that we had with that, when we did that targeted project. We invited them to come in. They met with conservationists one-on-one and spent some time with them. Staff was coached to listen to their objectives for their land. And I have to tell you, I was the greeter. I stood at the door and greeted everybody and set them up with their conservationists. Once people start talking about their land, they can't shut up. It was amazing. Once you start listening to their objectives and how they went on and how open it was and so forth. And it really does come down to relationships and people that they trust. And I want to touch a little bit on the last one there in terms of showing appreciation too. I know that's important, and this is where the mangoes and the monkeys come in a little bit, but I chose a different story, I'm sorry, about elephants. And if any of you have read the book Switch, When Change is Hard, I do recommend it, by Heath and Heath. In the last part of that book, they talk about sustaining change and how important appreciation, recognition, and so forth is in sustaining change. And they talk about how animal trainers work. And they only work with positive reinforcement. And they give the example of working with elephants, that if you work with negative reinforcement, you're going to be squished. And that one animal trainer has trained 7 or 10 elephants to stand in a row and all pee at the same time. All with positive reinforcement. You know, we know that, and we have our landowner recognition types of things, land stewards, conservationists of the month, that kind of thing, where we recognize people. But I've more recently asked staff to go a little deeper than this. Just recognition from an organization or in the paper, gets you a little bit, but I've asked staff to be genuine, but to personally thank people when they think they deserve it. I think this is huge. We also are intentionally trying to build these relationships. This is the face of conservation in Scott County right now. This is Ryan Holzer. And he and several other young people are now the face of conservation, because we had 2 retirements in the last couple of years that cost us 50 years of relationships. And so these young people need to come along and develop that relationship. And so we have certain things that we do with staff. We judge people when we hire them based on their human resource skills. Technical skills are great. The human resource skills are really important. We emphasize and train these types of things. We've also taken to assigning staff to specific producers to develop relationships with, so that the person selling filter strips doesn't pass the person selling wetland restoration down the driveway. It's one person that landowner has to deal with. And we've also started doing signing liaisons with various organizations, the sportsmen's clubs or the lake association and so forth. And we've done that based on roles. The SWC staff is taking the roles with individual landowners. My staff, the county staff, the WMO staff are taking the relationships with organizations. And so we're being very clear on roles too. We're also being a little protective. I know folks come to us every once in a while, they want to do some projects with us, contact our landowners. We go, wait a minute. These relationships have taken a long time to develop. We're very protective of them. I surprised myself a few weeks ago when I said, I'll throw an agency under a bus in a heartbeat to protect a relationship. So, Rebecca, PCA, it's nothing personal. But, so Ryan, back to Ryan again. Ryan gets trust because he earns it, and he's responsive to people and listens and understands. He also gets trust because the SWCD, as you saw from Mae's slide, has a very good reputation. So he has some that's certainly inherited. A third area where Ryan gets a lot of trust, he was born in this neighborhood. So again, being a local boy brings a lot of trust to that. I think many of you know that work in these rural communities. Dr. Davenport's research and how this works in there. You saw this graph of who influences conservation decisions. And you can see the SWCD, and unfortunately we didn't call out NRCS differently. I lumped them together. I think when we say SWCD, they're sort of grouped together there. I'm with the WMO a little further over there on the right. We've already attached our wagon to the SWCD. We knew they had a good relationship. The thing that surprised me, and I also heard it surprised DNR too, when you got these results, was that you're trusted this well as well. So we're going to plan to attach our wagon to yours as well, Dave, and other DNR folks, and work together. The other thing that struck me was when Mae talked about the increased likelihood of maintaining buffers, that learning how, that knowledge was very important, and also financial resources. We made the decision about a year or two ago to move away from financial resources and more toward emphasizing the technical assistance that we provide. And so I'm going to have to dive into this one a little bit more in terms of sifting through Mae's results and how we work that, because I saw financial resources was still pretty high. We actually want to move away from that a little bit. So back to that one slide that we saw before. If we think about the golden rule and willing landowners, I think we touch on that, some of the things that why landowners do conservation, the appreciation part of it. They're asked by someone they trust, and then on the why they don't, providing that technical assistance, helping them with the knowledge of what to do. Now if we go to success, experts now are saying all the time, build on success. And I agree with that. Think about it, when you're a kid, which team did you want to get picked on for? The winning team or the losing team? You want to get picked for the winning team. So we need to do messaging that shows we're winning. It's part of it. We also, before I got involved with Mae's research, I was reading a lot of the work by Elinor Ostrom, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics a few years ago, for basically proving that people need to believe their hard work will result in something in order for them to participate. So they need to believe that their actions make a difference. We look at Mae's work, again, strong conservation ethic was something that showed up in there. 86% people believed they had an obligation. Only 19% said they didn't know what the water quality was in their backyard. We didn't ask them if they knew the real quality. They said they had an opinion on it, I suppose. So those kinds of things we feel sort of success. We can build on those. But these other areas of acting in community, being civically engaged, was kind of low, as were their belief in their ability and belief in the leadership. It shows that I'm making a lot of difference, I guess. So those are things that we can build on, too, and improve. And Mae showed this slide, and she did call out those two areas that were kind of lower. So with the non-adopters, perceived inability. You need to show success, but there is ability. And less civically engaged. And so here's some of the things we're already doing. We're working on stories of success at both the water body level. We've got stories about Credit River being removed from the impaired waters list. The Minnesota River biology report by PCA showed improvement. We did groundwater monitoring, and groundwater was fairly good shape in Scott County. There's also stories about individuals who do conservation successfully. So there's two levels of stories we can do. And then we're planning a number of events to do celebration or to get people more civically involved. We're going to have a little event for the Credit River celebration, getting it off the impaired waters list. We're having a large thank you event in the middle of this summer to invite all the people who've done projects with us. We've got an invitation list of over 1,000 people. So that'll be types of things we're doing. We have a couple of projects where we're going to try to get community groups to come out and do the vegetation planting part of it, to get them involved, those types of things. So, willing landowners and success. There, I think we're hitting core values. That getting them civically engaged shows that's a core value across Scott County. Again, appreciation and recognition, and we're working on that belief that their action will make a difference by showing success stories. Finally, Mom was right. You can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I have a project now that large problem was caused by erosion of a ditch through no willful act of any landowner. And that occurred in about 2007. It's now 2012, and I finally have those landowners at the table. The reason why a landowner didn't come to the table was because his neighbor wrote something about him in the paper. I also have a general rule that I try not to have people hear about things from other people. They hear it from me or hear it from staff first. We had a meeting with our board where we discussed our plans to move forward on various projects, and it was very specific as to who we were going to talk to for those projects, which landowners we were going to go to on them. And as I went through the meeting, the press came in. Fortunately, I'd already developed a relationship with the press so that I could go to her after the meeting and I said, can you please wait to publish this for 2 weeks? I'm scheduled to meet with the landowners in the next week. I would like to meet with them first and have them read about this in the newspaper. Okay. What happens when people read negative things about themselves or hear them? They get defensive. Okay? This is conflict resolution 101. When they get defensive, what do? Take sides. When they take sides, what happens? They're entrenched. They don't move. You can't get them to do things. So you have to kind of avoid that, getting into that to start with. So again, back to that one slide, what does this do? This addresses the why they don't and that part about being disenfranchised or defensive. I'm real quick to wrapping up, but I want to say something about staff. Staff needs to understand where you're going, particularly if you are targeting and trying to be more efficient with your dollars and so forth. We've been creating a brand for our staff and for our programs of getting conservation on the land. What's implied there for the staff part is getting targeted conservation on the land. They know that. I find, though, that I have to meet with them about twice a year to remind them, because otherwise, as we proceed to our goal, we take these turns in different directions, and the amount of deviation, let me use a scientific term here, amount of deviation from that line on your goal is what is created by your staff. They have to stay on target, and they have to know that too. There is going to be a natural tendency for them to develop friendships with the people that they work with, and thus, if they person comes in with a project that doesn't necessarily meet your targeting, they still want to be a friend of that landowner and try to make that work, and you kind of have to tell them it's okay to say no. Learning and adapting. I do have time to go through this a little bit. I put this slide up here not to pick on the topic of this conference, but I really like this because I'm guilty of this. We as scientists sometimes don't get started because we try to be too perfect and to get started. And I think one of the challenges for us is the science now can give us these tools to be very precise. Social science isn't quite there. Social science works by having momentum with your landowners. But it occurs to me that there is two ways to achieve precision. You can start with precision, or you can start with momentum. And if you have momentum and you can learn and adapt, that can lead you to precision over time, and you can have a similar outcome. But for the social side of it and working with people, having momentum, ability to show success, and that their work is collectively making a difference is huge in my experience. So, follow the golden rule, build on success, and listen to your mom. And we'll take some questions. And these were my opinions, not Mae's. Yeah, Ross?
Paul, what does your mom rule say about the future of regulation in water resource management?
You really want to get me in trouble. I don't know that it says anything. As many of you know this, I am firmly in the camp of volunteer stuff. But we have to be very strategic about it in terms of working with landowners and so forth. And if volunteerism is going to work, it makes our job at the local level difficult if people have already taken sides because of other things being said in newspapers and so forth, particularly about regulation. And so, Ross, I don't know that I can give you a great answer on that. Thanks a lot.
Your story about the landowners that you were trying to get to the table and it took a long time to get them because one had written something about the other. What was the event, or was it just time that finally got them to the table? What happened that made it change?
The question is the story where we had the landowner that wouldn't come to the table because of what was said in the paper about him by another landowner. What was the change that happened? A couple things that did happen was it was potentially communicated that there could be some regulatory action. And so that brought folks together. And the second thing was a visit by the county administrator himself to the landowners and the opportunity for that one landowner to vent and have someone listen to him.
If I recall, your survey response rate was less than 50%. Is that? Have you thought about or what the concern would be if you had heard from those other 50%? And it was self-selecting, so the people who didn't even decide to return the survey, how their responses may affect your overall data, the proportions of people that are willing, not willing, et cetera?
That's a great question about the response rate was 46%, and are we concerned about non-respondents or non-response bias? Certainly, that's a concern. We did do some non-response bias analysis, so we looked at early respondents versus late respondents to see what differences there are. And there are some significant differences between folks who responded early and late. So that can be an issue. With a mailing like this, a landowner survey, 46% is a pretty good response rate. So we feel good about that. And we use those 4-wave mailing with reminders, so we tried to increase that as best as we can. But that is something, you know, that we have to consider, is that we're representing the opinions of those who took the time to complete the survey and not those who tossed it in the garbage several times. So, and that's a good concern. In the report, I have more details about those findings and what the implications of those might be.
Leanne, about the Association of Saltwater Districts, how are you going to take your study and share that? I'm sure I've got another 89 saltwater districts that would love to have access to that data information. What's the plan for that?
Yeah, I just gave it to Paul yesterday. So he has it. No, it will be available. The report is available on PDF. If you go to the University of Minnesota website and look me up or Google me, you can find my personal website, and the report is there. And so it's available for anybody who wants to take a look at it. Thank you.